In this video, we'll give you the best quarterback to target in the 4th and 5th rounds in 2024 fantasy redraft leagues. I'm Jim Coventry with Anthony Cervino of Rotowire.
Jim, the first quarterback we're going to talk about is Patrick Mahomes, and this is a quarterback I am all in on. Now, normally, it is not optimal to take a quarterback, in these early rounds. But this year, I am willing to roll the dice on a few of them, and one of them is Mahomes. Now, Patrick Mahomes last year, he had an uncharacteristic Patrick Mahomes season, QB8 overall, QB10 in points per game. That points per game total was his fewest since 2017, his rookie year. He has finished as a top 6 or better quarterback in points per game every other year. Last year drops to 10th. The Chiefs realized, hey, we need to get this guy a little bit more help. And they went out and got Xavier Worthy, Hollywood Brown. We know we have Rice coming back, Kelsey coming into the season healthy. This pass-catching unit around Patrick Mahomes is the best since Tyreek Hill was there. And I believe Patrick Mahomes will bounce back. When you have a coordinator, an offensive play caller like Andy Reid, a quarterback with the skill set of Mahomes and all these weapons around him, I don't think it's crazy to say that Patrick Mahomes this year, when it comes to projecting his finish, he has overall quarterback one upside. And I get it. He doesn't have the rushing upside of Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, but he can run. What Patrick Mahomes can potentially bring to the table, I mean, let's go back to 2022. 2022, it was his first year without Tyreek Hill, and he still throws for 5,250 yards, completes 67.1% of his passes, and 41 touchdowns. He could potentially have another season like that this year, and we can get Patrick Mahomes sometimes as the third quarterback off the board.
The next quarterback in this range of drafts, going a little bit after Mahomes, is Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. Now, did you know that Lamar Jackson threw for 3,678 yards in 16 games? Doesn't sound like a lot, but that was over 500 more yards than Jackson had in his first MVP season in 2019. Now, he did play one fewer game, but still per game, significantly better. What I did like about Lamar Jackson last year was as he learned Todd Monken's offense, he got better as the season went on. Jackson had 2 300-yard games in his last 4 and only 3 on the season, so those are getting better. Also, the touchdown numbers through the air were getting better. There were 4 multi-touchdown passing games through the Week 12 bye, and then Jackson had 4 of them alone in the last 6 games, which did include the NFL playoffs. So we saw that progression in that offense, even though the weapons were not great. And a lot of that was without Mark Andrews, who suffered a Week 11 injury. Now, Jackson did throw 24 touchdown passes, third most of his career. But of course, if we're drafting Lamar Jackson, we are drafting a major running threat, and that is where the big fantasy value is. Now, Jackson had at least 35 rush yards in all but 2 games, and he had over 50 yards 9 times last year in 18 games. That includes the NFL playoffs. So half of the time he's over 50 yards. What a massive advantage. And also the rushing touchdowns. He did score 8 in 18 games. Now, again, that includes the playoffs. Derrick Henry's there. Now, some of those short touchdowns, not that Lamar Jackson's touches are all short, some of them do come from distance, but we do have to understand Henry could take a few touchdowns. But I do think the evolution of this offense is going to continue to add to the weaponization of Jackson. Zay Flowers, year 2. We said earlier, Mark Andrews back from injury. The team is hopeful, maybe wrongly, that Rashad Bateman will pick up where he left off 2 years ago as opposed to last year, where maybe he didn't know the offense. Whatever it was a problem. Now, I should also point out, though, the Ravens did lose 3 of their 5 starting offensive linemen. They bring back center Tyler Linderbaum and then left tackle Ronnie Stanley, though he's injured a lot. So this could be a little bit of an issue, but overall, Lamar Jackson should have a super high floor and be a strong fantasy option. Now, if you enjoy videos like this, please consider hitting the like button and subscribe to the Rotowire Fantasy Football channel on YouTube. Also, you can check out all of our fantasy football content and rankings by getting a free 2-day trial with no credit card needed. You head over to rotowire.com/Jim, and you can see all of our content.
Jim, the next quarterback we're going to talk about, Anthony Richardson, and he is one of my favorite quarterbacks going in these early rounds. Now, earlier I said, Patrick Mahomes is one I would target. The other one is Anthony Richardson. Anthony Richardson might be the riskiest quarterback you can draft because he does have that reckless style. He does have that injury concern, but he also might have the highest ceiling of all quarterbacks in 2024. If we go back to that very small sample size we've seen Anthony Richardson, he played in 4 games. 2 of those games in which he finished, he was a quarterback 4 and a quarterback 2 on the week. In week 2 against Houston, a game where he only had 10 passing attempts, he had 17.7 fantasy points because he rushed for 35 yards and 2 touchdowns. And of course, he got knocked out very early in week 5 against Tennessee. So in the games that he finishes, he puts up elite fantasy production. If we look at the supporting cast on the Colts, we know that they have one of the better offensive lines in the league. They're getting Jonathan Taylor back, no contract situation, no holdout, no injuries. In fact, last year, JT and Richardson, they have yet to play a game together. We talk about Michael Pittman coming off of his breakout year. Josh Downs entering his year 2 after a very solid rookie campaign, most of which played with Gardner Minshew. They drafted A.D. Mitchell. They have Alec Pierce, who's actually having a very surprising good camp right now. This team is loaded, and I can't forget one of my favorite offensive minds in the league, and Stan Steichen, what he could potentially do for Anthony Richardson. When we go back to his resume with Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts, even last year with Gardner Minshew, the stars are aligned for Anthony Richardson to potentially break fantasy football. But again, there is an injury risk involved.
So how do you rank these out?
For me, it's a little bit difficult. We take these 3 players, but Patrick Mahomes is number 1 for me. He's also my overall quarterback 1. I just love all the additional weapons, and I keep going back to that 2022 season, throwing for over 5,200 yards and all those touchdowns, the first year without Hill, and all of a sudden they give Patrick Mahomes 2 new speedster wide receivers, a healthy Kelsey. I think the sky's the limit for Patrick Mahomes. Number 2 might surprise people. I am not only ranking Anthony Richardson ahead of Lamar Jackson in this, but in my quarterback rankings, I have Richardson 1 spot ahead of Lamar Jackson. I just love the ceiling here. I'm all in on this player. I am willing to take a risk. Now, there's a disclaimer here. If you are willing to draft Anthony Richardson, you must equip a backup quarterback. Normally, if you're drafting a quarterback this high, I will not draft another quarterback at all, or maybe wait until the final round just to protect myself if need be. But with Anthony Richardson, you have to protect your fantasy football investment and draft a QB2, possibly a little bit earlier than you normally would. And finally, Lamar Jackson. I'm not down on Lamar Jackson. He's one of the better fantasy football quarterbacks. He has that rushing upside. He has that rushing floor. But when it comes to his weapons, I'm a little bit worried. They didn't really do a lot this offseason to help him out at wide receiver. And then they bring in Derrick Henry. And I believe Derrick Henry, if there's anybody who can eat in to that Lamar Jackson rushing floor, it is Derrick Henry.
Yeah, so in terms of my rankings, Mahomes is first. And since you could get him usually after the first 2 quarterbacks off the board, you want a quarterback early. Definitely like Anthony, I'm in on that. I do think this is a season where they're going to be able to throw more than ever and have success. Like Anthony, because of the draft costs, Jackson usually will go a half a round or a round or more earlier than Richardson. So Richardson's cheaper, and I think Richardson has, like Anthony said, a great upside, and I agree completely that you must be taking one of the top backup quarterbacks as well because of the injury risk, and this is one of the cases you have to hedge it. With Jackson, again, we love Lamar Jackson, and we think he's a superstar, but losing 3/5 of the line, you said they're bringing Derrick Henry in. We're really not sold completely on the array of weapons. All that said, Jackson has a little more risk than usual, so he's number 3 for me as well.